Hello and welcome to another one of these. This time, this is a DFK 1.5 1L. And you might be asking why I am uploading a 1L if I just uploaded a OMOTE 2L just a few weeks ago. And the reason for that is that this clear is actually kind of special to me. And the reason for that is that this is my first time ever clearing the FK. That's what this clear that you're watching right now is. This is my first time clearing the FK, and this was at a time where I was still relatively new um, when it comes to this 1cc business. I think at this time I had like less than 10 arcade clears. Um, Let me think. My first one was Mushi Original, then Futari Black Label Original, I think. Then it was DDP, then DOJ, then DonPachi, then Big Storm, and then this one. So this was my seventh clear, my seventh arcade clear ever. So I was still really new to arcade games and to shmups when it comes to 1cc, and I think it really shows in the gameplay. Especially later, you will see some really funny dodges. And I just thought it was going to be maybe interesting to see this clear right after one of my latest DFK clears, the OMOTE clear that I uploaded before. I don't know, I thought it was going to be maybe a little bit interesting. And I have this weird relationship with DFK, if I am being honest, where there have been a lot of moments in my life where I have changed a lot my opinion on this game, and this is probably the single cave game that I have changed my mind the most through the years. So, for example, I remember that I used to love DFK back when I was really casual about shmups. I This was the first ever DoDonPachi game that I played, and the first time I played this game, it was at a time where I wasn't really interested in doing 1cc's and things like that, so I wasn't doing none of that, and I was just perfectly happy with just credit feeding my way through the game. Then I finally got into 1cc, um, into one credit clears, and when it was time for me to finally clear DFK, I was at first really excited because this is a game that I already love, and I finally will be able to clear it. And then I finally got around to playing the game, and when it was time to clear it, I did it, and I just didn't really like it that much, if I am honest. And I think we have DOJ to blame for that, because at that time I have already cleared DOJ, and DOJ has this hyper mechanic, which you probably already know. I mean, uh, I would say it's one of the things DOJ is famous for introducing the hyper mechanic to the DoDonPachi series. And the way hyper works in DOJ is really beautiful to me. It's really engaging, um, but also at the same time it has like so many subtleties to it, and it keeps you engaged. It doesn't really matter what your skill level is or what you're aiming for with the game, as long as it's a 1cc. So it doesn't really matter if you're going for a 1cc of the first loop or for the second loop, or you're just trying to score. um, Hyper is always going to be there in a way that is interesting, in a way in which you have to really take it into consideration, uh, because it affects your rank. It makes it cancels bullets upon activation. but it makes enemies more aggressive, and you can use it to get a lot of hits, and it makes chain easier. But also, if you die while you have a hyper, you won't unlock your next bomb slot. And you just have so many considerations that you have to keep in mind when you're using a hyper in DOJ. It's also an item that you have to pick up when you fill your hypermeter, so you can also ignore it if you want. And at the same time, it's in the same key that your bombs are. So there are a lot of things going for this mechanic in DOJ. In DFK, it was simplified. So in DFK, it's like Hyper is this really powerful tool. In fact, I would say it's probably the single most overpowered tool in any of the DoDonPachi games, where you keep some of the things from DOJ, like you have a lot of you make more damage and it cancel bullets, but it's not really the same. It's like the it works like the hyper in DOJ, but without any of the consequences of hyper in DOJ. So, for example, now hyper is easier to get, easier than ever. It's really easy to just fill your hypermeter and get one. It's no longer an item that you have to pick up. You will always get a hyper, so that's something that you don't really have to worry about, really. And probably the things that makes it the most powerful is the fact that when you use a hyper, you can use your shot to erase bullets. So not only do you cancel bullets when your hyper finishes, which is a change from DOJ. DOJ, your hyper cancel bullets upon activation. Here, it only cancels bullets on the activation, but now you erase bullets with your shot. And it doesn't really have any consequences on the rank of the game. And if it has, it's so minimal that you aren't really able to notice it that much. It does affect the hyper rank, but that's a different thing. So that's the thing. It's a really powerful resource that is really easy to get back. And now hyper is no longer in the same key than bombs are in DOJ. And you might think that might open the opportunity for you to have more choices to make, whether you use a hyper or a bomb. But that isn't really the case, because hyper is so good that there is no reason to bomb in this game, really. If you route it, you will find that you just will be using hyper most of the time. So there isn't really any reason to use a bomb most of the time. You will just be using hyper. So at the end of the day, it's just one single choice, and that's the thing with DFK. I think with DFK's hyper, that's my main issue with it. Is the fact that something that had a lot of implications, even had a lot of subtle implications in the gameplay in DOJ, that isn't really present here in DFK. In DFK, the choice is simple. You just use it. It doesn't make sense not to use hyper in DFK. Of course, I'm just speaking from my perspective. This is just how I feel about the game. And I think OMOTE and Ura, the second loop, the two routes for the second loop of the game, do a better job at justifying just how OP hyper really is because of the difficulty, especially Ura, I think, because in OMOTE, even if OMOTE is harder, even in OMOTE, I still think hyper might be still a little bit too much, even with a hyper rank actually having consequences. But in In Ura is really is more apparent. Um, because of the difficulty in Ura, I think it really works much better. But the moment where Hyper really starts to shine, in my opinion, is when you try to go for a score. Honestly, um, when if you try to play for a score, you will immediately understand each and every single one of the changes that they made for Hyper coming from DOJ. Everything just makes so much sense now. And just to give a really brief explanation of how um, scoring works in this game, basically, you want to use your Hyper to get a lot of hits, and once you have a lot of hits, um, you want to build your Hyper back again as fast as possible. And once your Hyper meter is full, you don't use your Hyper because that will activate a secret multiplier, and that's where most of your score is going to be coming from. And also, that makes your chain work just like in older DoDonPachi games. And by that, what I mean is that when you drop your chain, it goes back to zero instead of uh, going down slowly like it usually does. And it's really interesting. It's a really interesting way to play. You have this really overpowered tool that the game is actively telling you to restrain yourself from using it recklessly. The game actually wants you to think about when you are using it, and how you use it. By the way, look at this dodge here. That was crazy. I don't know. Maybe I was better at the shmups than I am right now. Because at the time I didn't have like anything routed at all. The only thing that I routed for this clear was the first stage for the scoring. But that was all. But yeah, like I was saying, it's much more interesting Hyper if you are trying to score in this game. I think it really comes to life, and that's the reason why I have so many weird feelings uh, when it comes to DFK, because there are things that I absolutely love about it, and there are things that I don't really like that much about it. And I think Hyper is one of those things. I think when I am scoring, I am having a lot of fun, but whenever I am just trying to survive the game, especially the first loop, I don't like it that much. So now that I have experience playing, uh, now that I have experience with other aspects of DFK, now that I have gone for OMOTE, and now that I have some experience with Ura, I think I appreciate it more. But especially with scoring, I think I appreciate what they try to do with Hyper, and I understand why they change it from DOJ, basically. And yes, that's basically where I am at when it comes to DFK. I think that the best mechanics in shmups are mechanics that work and that are engaging. It doesn't really matter what you're trying to do in the game, and that's the case for Hyper in DOJ, where it doesn't really matter whether you're going for a first loop or for a second loop or for scoring. Hyper is going to be engaging, and it's going to be this really cool tool that you can use and that you have to route around. Um, that's not really the case in DFK. In DFK, it works really well in some places, like when you're going to score or when you're going for the second loop, and for the first loop it doesn't really work that well in my opinion. And I think it should. I think it's not worth it to make one aspect of the game worse or not as engaging in order to make another one really good, if that makes any sense. Um, Anyways, I just noticed that I haven't said absolutely anything about the about the actual gameplay. I thought I was going to title this a DFK 1 commentary, but now I am not really sure if that's appropriate, because I haven't said anything about the gameplay really, about the gameplay on screen. I mean, but hey, I am in stage 5 now, and like I said before, I actually don't know how. What can I say about this run? Because like I said, I didn't really. I remember not really routing anything for it. I remember I only routed the first stage to get a little bit of score, um, and then that was it. And maybe I practiced once or twice the the last stage, stage 5. But and I was really lucky also that I was recording this run, because I don't at the end of at the end of the at the end of the replay, you will see that the game doesn't really ask me to save a replay. It doesn't even ask me to input my name to save my score. So that sucks, honestly, because that's one of the things that I really like. I always love seeing replays and seeing people, when they input their name, and you can see the score and things like that. So it's a shame that uh, I didn't get to do that here. I was kind of pissed off about that. And the reason for that, I think, is because I was using reset. So when you go into the menu, when you're doing attempts, you can just, there is an option so you can reset. And that's just faster than going back to the menu and then trying to select the ship that you want to use and then going back into the game. It's just faster to use reset. But if you do that, then the game won't. The game is not going to ask you to save a replay, and it isn't going to save your score either, or your name. So, I guess keep that in mind if you're trying to clear the FK and you want to have a recording of the game. But yeah, I don't know what else to say, honestly. I just thought this would be a this was more an excuse more than anything else for me to just jab a little bit more about DFK, because I didn't really have the chance in the OMOTE career to really talk about my feelings about the game. But yeah, this is the video. I actually thought it was going to be a little bit more along the lines of a normal commentary, but since this run is barely routed, I don't really have that much to say about it. So yeah, that's going to be all. I am going to be uploading another 1cc either next week or the week right after. I don't really know, and it's definitely not going to be anything DFK related. I think 2 DFK 1.5 videos is more than enough. So maybe I will just upload a different run. At first I thought, maybe that I could maybe upload something, maybe a DFK Black Label clear. But I don't know, 2 DFK videos is a lot. I think, at least it is for me. I feel like I have talked too much about this game already. So yeah, hopefully it's going to be another smoke, another interesting clear. Well, for now, this is all that I have. and I will leave you just with a gameplay now.
ゲームオーバー。お疲れ様でした。